Hello and welcome to part 2 of the DPkit node tutorials. Okay, what I'm going to do in this one is to show you a few little techniques you can use just to spice things up and change things around and generally make stuff more interesting. First thing we need to bear in mind is quite often this order that the parts were created in isn't the order that we actually want our parts to move in. So what we need to do is actually change the order of them. Right, and there's no way of actually obviously clicking on them and changing the numbers or anything like that. We have to actually do it in Modeler. So if we go back to Modeler, and we have our 4 cubes there. So simplest and easiest way of doing this is actually just to cut them out of this layer and paste them back in one at a time in the order we want them to move. So polygon mode, edit, cut, and paste to a second layer. Now we can actually pick them to actually bring them back in the order we want. So say we want them moving in a clockwise direction starting from there and going round. What we do is we pick this one first, edit, copy, edit, paste, then the next one, copy, edit, paste, edit, copy, edit, paste, and that one, edit, copy, edit, paste. Okay, and that's reordered the way that Lightwave looks at them as individual parts. Right, this lot we can just get rid of now. We don't need them at all. Okay, so now we'll save this. And we'll synchronize layout. And switch back to layout. Right, and the first thing you might notice, it's all gone horribly wrong. This is just a bug in the DPkit running on the Mac, as far as I know. In 11.63, it may well be sorted in a more recent version of DPkit, and it may well be sorted in a more recent version of Lightwave. I'm not sure because I don't run them. But anyway, so yes, it's a bit faulty, but there's an easy way of getting around it. All we do is File, just reopen the scene. Load out of that. Okay, and now you can see our point order has changed. So starting with 0, 1, 2 and 3. So now if we play the animation, we can see that it starts and they all drop in a clockwise fashion. Okay, so that's fairly straightforward. So let's get back into the node editor and I'll show you some other stuff. Okay, we'll get rid of those, we don't need those at the moment. Clean things up. Right, one of the things you can do if you want to change the look of the animation very slightly is instead of using this add node, you can actually use a multiply node. So if we take a multiply node, plug that into there, plug that into there, move that out of the way a bit, plug that into there, and if we do that, you can see now we've got a slightly different motion involved, but also this one is not moving because we are multiplying by 0. This is part number 0 and we're multiplying by 0. So a simple way of getting rid of that is just to use this add node there and we just add 1 and then we're never multiplying by 0. So now we have the animation in a slightly different manner. It's just a different look. Basically what it is, they're actually accelerating due to the multiplying factor. So rather than moving in a linear fashion with a spacing between each one, as you can see, they accelerate into the motion. So the first one starts moving slowly and the second one comes in a little bit faster than the third and the fourth. It's just a different look. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But it's a different thing you can do to make things look different and work in a different way. Next thing I want to show you is just another way of adding some interest to the movement. We'll get rid of this multiply node for now, and we'll just go back to the basic scene setup to get going. So now we are back to what we had as a default before. Quite often you might have somebody leaning over your shoulder and saying, yeah, I don't really like those cubes, the way they're moving. I want them to accelerate in and then decelerate when they come to the ground. So how do you actually achieve that? Well, the simplest way is to actually use a gradient node. So we get a gradient node here and we open it up. Now you're thinking, how do we actually use this to manipulate what we've got? Well, what I can do is actually use the alpha channel. So what I will do this is set this to the end. We already know that we have 4 seconds in here as our end time. So I'll set that to 4. And then we just create another key. We'll drag that down to the end. Now, if we make the alpha on this 0 and plug this into here and plug the alpha back into there, oops, and drag that down, now you can see it's not quite working right as we might expect it to. Well, the first thing we need to do is actually change the alpha here to 400%. This is purely down to the legacy Lightwave stuff, where inputs to nodes can be the percents or factors of 1, and basically all the same value. It's just the way that the nodes are being built and arranged. They've got various different inputs. So sometimes you just need to play around with the numbers to get the result you expect. So anyway, now we've got that, you can now see our cubes are moving in the way we wanted to them, but we haven't really got any acceleration or deceleration. And also our cubes are moving in the opposite direction to the way they were again. Well, that's easy enough to solve. We'll just use invert values. So now our animation is back the way we expect it to be. Okay, so how do we actually get a fade in and a fade out? Well, the simplest and the easiest way is just to add in a couple more keys to our gradient. So if we just add one there, add one there, that may not actually seem to achieve anything, but if we just drag them out a little bit, it's actually moving the value that was there a little bit down. So it's almost like creating a curve of in and out. So now if we move them, you can see we've got a nice slow move in and a nice slow move into position, and we can change those just by dragging them around. So now it'll go even slower to start with and accelerate in the middle and slow down. And of course, if you really want to fine-tune the animation, you can actually go in there and work on the individual values and the positions of these keys to fine-tune it and get it looking exactly where you want. But if you just want a quick acceleration and deceleration technique, that's the way to go. Next, I just want to show you a couple of other things you can do that don't involve move. So once again, we'll get rid of this and simplify things. The way I want to do this, just basically to break down each individual element into what it does. You can actually combine these all later on yourself to get various effects, but it's easier just to show you what's happening with one thing going on at a time. Okay, so what happens, say, if we want to change this look of this entirely, and instead of having them moving in and out, we want them rotating. So say the blocks in a display or something like that, we want them to roll over and show different numbers. Well, we've already got this network, so what we can do is we can just plug this into the rotate. So if we look at this now, we can see that our cubes are actually all there, all rotating, but they're actually rotating more than 4 degrees. If you remember what we had here, we have our clamp, so it can't only go from 0 to 4. That's because Lightwave, a lot of the inputs use radians. Now, radians are a bit of a mathematical conceit. I don't really see the point for in Lightwave, but what they are is, it's another way of measuring angles like degrees, but there are 3.14, i.e. pi radians in 360 degrees. So there are nodes to convert from one to the other if you can't think of it straightforward, but for this it's quite simple. All we can do is we can change our clamp node to 3.14. So now our cubes are actually only going to rotate through 3.14 radians or 360 degrees. So we've done move and we've done rotate. How about scale? Well, we'll move that down to scale, plug that in. And you can see not a lot's happening because this vector, if we open it up, is set to 0 on the X and the Z. So we can just change that quickly by setting those to 1. And now we have our objects scaling up and down. Suppose we want our objects to disappear when they get to 0. How do we actually achieve that? Well, it goes back to a logic node. And a logic node is basically the kind of stuff you got into when you're doing programming at school. It just allows you to set various conditions and set various outputs. So what we need to do is if we plug this into there and plug our outputs into here, what we can actually do is set this. So what we need is if the input or A is 0, then we want these to be actually scaled down completely in the X and the Z, so they disappear completely. So we'll change that to 0. We'll change that to A is greater than. And now we have animations where our cubes appear from the middle of nowhere and then scale up. And there we go. That's about our 10 minutes. So that's a few things you can do just to spice up your nodal animations. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again later.